The air in the hotel hallway was a bland, recycled chill, smelling faintly of industrial cleaner and the ghosts of 1,000 strangers' perfumes. Tori wrestled with her suitcase, the faulty wool catching on the plush carpet every few feet. She was here for the annual Vibe Creative Conference, a 3-day ordeal of networking and forced inspiration she was already dreading. Her recent breakup with a man who had the emotional depth of a puddle had left her feeling raw and utterly depleted. A weekend of schmoozing was the last thing she wanted. She finally reached her room, 713. She slid the keycard into the slot and the satisfying green click was the first good thing to happen all day. She pushed the heavy door open and stepped inside. And the world tilted on its axis. The room itself was unremarkable. A king-sized bed with a crisp white duvet, a dark wood desk, a generic painting of a seaside landscape on the wall. Standard corporate forgettable. But the feeling in the room was anything but. It was a profound, bone-deep sense of coming home. The tension that had been a permanent resident in her shoulders for months simply dissolved. The air was warm, welcoming, and seemed to hum with a silent, waiting energy. Tori dropped her suitcase, letting the door click shut behind her, and took a deep, involuntary breath. That's when she smelled it. It wasn't a cologne or an air freshener. It was a scent so complex and intoxicating it seemed to bypass her nose and register directly in her soul. It smelled like a deep forest after a thunderstorm, of rich earth, pine needles, and a hint of something musky and intensely masculine, like worn leather and warm skin. It was the most incredible scent she had ever encountered, and it was everywhere, sinking into her pores, making her feel safe and dangerously aroused all at once. She walked through the room, touching the furniture, running a hand over the cool, smooth duvet. The scent was strongest near the bed, a phantom presence that made her skin tingle and her heart beat a little faster. This was insane. Housekeeping must have used some new ridiculously potent cleaner. That had to be it. But the feeling of homecoming was so real, so powerful. She kicked off her shoes and lay down on the bed, fully clothed, expecting the sensation to fade. It only intensified. The mattress seemed to curve around her, the pillows felt like they were made for her. Lying here, breathing in this impossible, perfect scent, she felt a wave of peace so profound it almost brought tears to her eyes. Beneath the peace, however, something else stirred. A strange, insistent pull. A feeling of anticipation, as if she were waiting for someone. As if the other side of this big empty bed wasn't supposed to be empty at all. A low, unfamiliar heat began to curl in her belly, a slow-burning desire for a man she had never met, sparked by a scent that shouldn't exist. She closed her eyes, utterly bewildered. What was in this room? Her hand drifted to the empty pillow beside her, her fingers tracing the crisp cotton. It felt charged with energy, humming with the ghost of a presence she now inexplicably, desperately needed to find. Chapter 2. The Scent of a Soul. Ben stalked down the 7th-floor hallway of the Grand Atlas Hotel, his tailored suit doing little to conceal the coiled power in his frame. He was here to be a shadow, a whisper of authority. One of the younger, stupider members of a rival pack had been causing trouble in the city, getting careless, breaking the rules. It was Ben's job as the enforcer for the Blackwood Dominion, to convince him to leave. It was a tedious, aggravating task and he was in no mood for complications. For decades, Ben had moved through the human world like a ghost, his senses on a leash, his inner wolf a sleeping beast of controlled violence. He'd long since given up on the old legends, the whispered tales of fated mates and soul-deep connections. Power and duty were his reality, a lonely, unchanging landscape. He passed room 711, then 712. And then he was hit by a scent that brought him to his knees. It wasn't a physical blow, but it might as well have been. It slammed into him, bypassing his thoughts, his control, his decades of icy discipline, and struck the raw, primal core of his being. Vanilla and something bright like citrus, with an undercurrent of fresh rain on pavement. It was the scent of his other half, the scent his wolf had been searching for since the day it was born. Mate. The word was not a thought, it was a detonation in his soul. His heart hammered against his ribs, his breath caught in his throat, and the beast inside him, the one he kept so perfectly controlled, awoke with a violent, possessive roar. It clawed at the inside of his chest, screaming a single frantic command. Find her. Take her. His vision tunneled. The bland hotel hallway, the ugly carpet, the hum of the ice machine. It all faded to nothing. There was only the scent. He could feel her, a warm living beacon just a few feet away. His body moved on its own, drawn by an invisible, unbreakable tether. He came to a stop in front of room 713. He was in there. His hand rose, his fingers brushing against the cool wood of the door. He could feel the echo of her presence through it, a hum of energy that resonated with his own. Every protective, possessive, and predatory instinct he possessed was firing at once. He needed to break down the door to sweep her into his arms, to surround her with his scent, to brand her as his. The sheer, savage force of the impulse terrified him. He was losing control, something that hadn't happened in 50 years. He snatched his hand back as if burned, taking a stumbling step away from the door. He clenched his fists, his claws threatening to slice through his skin. Duty. He was here on a mission. He had a rogue to handle. He couldn't afford this. He couldn't afford her. A mate, a human mate, was a complication that could get them both killed. But his wolf didn't care about duty or danger. It cared only about the female on the other side of that door. Ben leaned his head against the wall opposite her room, the cool plaster a stark contrast to the fire raging through his veins. He closed his eyes, fighting a war within himself. He had to walk away. He had to finish his mission and get out of this city, away from this hotel, away from her. But his feet were lead. The scent held him captive, a golden chain wrapped around his soul. And he knew with a terrifying absolute certainty that he wasn't going anywhere. Chapter 3: The Collision. Tori couldn't stay in the room. The feeling, the scent, the longing, it was too much, a beautiful, maddening prison. She needed air. She needed to walk it off. She needed to prove to herself that the moment she stepped out of room 713, the spell would be broken. She pulled the door open and stepped into the hallway, her eyes on the floor. A pair of expensive, polished black shoes stood directly in her path. Her gaze traveled up. Long legs in perfectly tailored dark trousers. A broad chest beneath a crisp white shirt and a loosened tie. A strong jawline with a hint of dark stubble. And then his eyes. They were the color of warm whiskey, flecked with gold, and they were fixed on her with an intensity that was like a physical blow. He was breathtakingly handsome, but it wasn't just his looks that made the air leave her lungs. It was the raw, predatory power that radiated from him in palpable waves. And it was the fact that the scent from her room, pine, storm, and leather, was rolling off him 1,000 times more potent, 1,000 times more real. He was the source. Ben's carefully constructed control shattered the moment she opened the door. Seeing her was like seeing the sun for the first time. Her hair was a cascade of soft brown waves, her eyes a startling, intelligent green. She was even more perfect than his wolf had imagined. He could smell the faint, delicious tremor of fear on her, mingled with a scent of pure female arousal that was aimed directly at him. He felt it too. The hallway, once a neutral space, was now a supercharged vacuum, shrinking until it was only the few feet of air between them. They stood frozen, staring for a beat that stretched into an eternity. "Excuse me," Tori finally managed to whisper, her voice shaky. Ben's throat was dry. He couldn't speak. He just shook his head slightly, a minute, negative motion. "No, I will not excuse you. I will not let you go." She tried to step around him and he moved with her, a silent, fluid motion that blocked her path again. A flicker of fear crossed her face and it was like a knife in his gut. He was scaring her. I was just going to get some ice," she stammered, gesturing vaguely down the hall. "The machine is broken," he said. His voice was a low, gravelly rumble that vibrated through her, making the heat in her belly clench. It was a lie. He had no idea if the machine was broken, but he would have ripped it from the wall to keep her here for another second. Their hands were hanging at their sides, inches apart. As she shifted her weight, the back of her hand brushed against his knuckles. A bolt of pure white-hot lightning shot up both their arms. Tori gasped, snatching her hand back as if she'd touched a live wire. Ben's entire body went rigid, a guttural growl catching in the back of his throat. The brief touch was an inferno, a confirmation. It was real. This impossible connection was terrifyingly, wonderfully real. His whiskey-colored eyes darkened with a possessive fire that made her knees weak. The air was thick with unspoken things, with a primal promise of pleasure and danger. He looked at her not like a man looks at a woman, but like a starving wolf looks at the moon. "Which room is yours?" he asked, his voice rough, though he already knew the answer. She swallowed hard, unable to look away, trapped in the gravitational pull of his gaze. 713, she breathed. A muscle in his jaw feathered. Of course it is. The faded room. You should go back inside, Tori, he murmured, his voice laced with a warning she didn't understand. Lock your door. He knew her name. He had read it on her conference badge, which was clipped to her purse. But hearing him say it in that low, possessive growl was the most intimate thing she had ever heard. He took a deliberate step back, giving her space, an act of control that cost him everything. It was a dismissal. A warning. An invitation. It was everything all at once. Shaking, Tori turned and practically fled back into the sanctuary of her room, slamming the door and leaning against it, her heart trying to beat its way out of her chest. Chapter 4. The Voice of Reason, the Call of Fate. The moment the door clicked shut, Tori's legs gave out. She slid down the cool wood to the floor, her body trembling with a mixture of terror and exhilarating excitement. Her hand, the one that had brushed his, tingled as if it were still being burned by his touch. What in God's name was happening? This wasn't normal attraction. This was something else, something elemental and overwhelming. It was as if her body, her very soul, had recognized him, had been waiting for him. Her phone buzzed in her pocket. She fumbled for it, her fingers clumsy. It was Enid, her colleague and best friend, no doubt calling to see if she'd checked in. Tori answered, her voice a breathy, unsteady mess. Hey. Whoa, you sound like you just ran a marathon. Or got lucky in the elevator. Please tell me it's the second one. Enid's cheerful voice crackled through the speaker. Enid, something weird is happening, Tori said, trying to keep her voice even. She explained it all. The strange feeling in the room, the intoxicating scent, the man in the hallway. She left out the part about the electric shock of his touch. It was too insane to say out loud. Okay, hold on, Enid said, her tone shifting from playful to concerned. So a hot, intimidating stranger cornered you in the hallway of a hotel where you're staying alone? Tori, that's not a romance novel. That's the beginning of a true crime documentary. Are you okay? Did he threaten you? No, it wasn't like that, Tori insisted, though a part of her knew Enid was right to be worried. He was intense. He told me to go back to my room and lock the door. It felt more like he was protecting me from himself. That's a classic line. Listen to me. Stay in your room, bolt the door, and if you see him again you call hotel security. Do not engage. You're vulnerable right now after the whole Mark debacle. Don't let some handsome sociopath mess with your head. Enid's words were a bucket of cold, rational water. He was right. It was crazy. It was dangerous. But her logic did nothing to quell the fire the stranger had ignited in Tori's blood, or the deep, instinctual pull that was still humming through her, telling her that the most dangerous thing she could do was stay away from him. Ben strode into his own room at the end of the hall and slammed the door, the wood groaning in protest. He paced the length of the room like a caged panther, his wolf clawing for release. He had her name. Tori. He had her scent. He had the memory of her touch searing his skin. He ripped his phone out and dialed a number he hadn't called in years. It was answered on the first ring. Benjamin. The voice on the other end was old, calm, and held an undercurrent of power. It was Elise, the matriarch and seer of his dominion. Elise. It's happened, Ben growled, forgoing any pleasantries. I've found her. There was a long silence on the other end. Then a soft, knowing sigh. I felt the shift in the threads, Elise said. The air has been electric for an hour. Tell me. She's human, Ben bit out, the words tasting like ash. She's in room 713 at the Grand Atlas. The scent, it's like nothing I could have imagined. My wolf is trying to tear its way out of my skin. Room 713, Elise murmured thoughtfully. The room of the first bond. Of course. The energy there would have amplified the connection, drawn you both like moths to a flame. The fates are not being subtle with you, boy. What do I do? Ben demanded, his control fraying. I have a job to do. She's a complication. A danger to herself and to me. She is not a complication. Elise's voice was firm, cutting through his panic. She is your destiny. Your Anam Cara. You have been half a soul for a century, Benjamin. She is your completion. But you are right to be cautious. Your nature, your world, it will terrify her. And your enemies, should they learn of her, will see her only as a weapon to use against you. I should leave, Ben said, the words a lie even as he spoke them. You cannot, Elise stated simply. The bond is forged. Trying to run from it now would be like trying to run from your own shadow. It will only tear you apart. Be patient. Be gentle. But do not, under any circumstances, let her go. The line went dead. Ben stared at the phone, Elise's words echoing in the room. Do not let her go. It was a command that resonated with every fiber of his being. His duty, his logic, his fear, they were all meaningless now. There was only one truth. Tori was his. And he was done fighting it. Chapter 5. The Inevitable. The hotel room, once a sanctuary, was now a cage. An hour had passed since Tori had fled from the man in the hall, an hour spent pacing, trying to rationalize the irrational pull she felt toward him. Enid's logical warnings warred with the primal, undeniable certainty in her gut. Every nerve ending was on fire, screaming for him. Her body ached with a need she had never experienced, a deep, cellular craving for his presence, his touch. She was losing her mind. She stood by the window, looking down at the glittering city lights, but she wasn't seeing them. She was replaying the moment their eyes met, the shock of recognition, the heat of his gaze. She could still feel the phantom pressure of his knuckles against her hand. A soft knock sounded at her door. Tori froze, her blood turning to ice and then just as quickly to fire. It was him. She knew it with a certainty that defied all logic. Her heart hammered against her ribs, a frantic, wild thing. Enid's voice screamed, "Don't open it," in her mind. But her body was already moving, drawn by an invisible string. She looked through the peephole. It was him. He was just standing there, his hands in his pockets, his expression a mask of tight control. But his eyes, his whiskey gold eyes, were burning with a desperate, tormented fire that was aimed directly at her. Her hand trembled as she undid the deadbolt and the security latch. This was madness. She was inviting a dangerous, intense stranger into her room. But staying away from him felt like a slow, painful death. She opened the door. Ben hadn't known what he was going to say. He only knew that staying in his own room 100 feet away from her was a physical impossibility. The bond was a chain, pulling him tighter with every second that passed. When she opened the door, her green eyes wide with a mixture of fear and the same desperate need he felt, his carefully planned words evaporated. He stepped across the threshold, and the moment the door clicked shut behind him, the tension that had been crackling between them finally snapped. He didn't touch her. He didn't have to. He took a deep, shuddering breath, his eyes closing for a second as he inhaled her scent, now pure and undiluted by the stale hallway air. "Tori," he rasped, her name a prayer and a plea. That was all it took. The sound of his voice, thick with raw, possessive longing, shattered her last shred of resistance. She met him in the middle of the room, her hands coming up to grip the front of his shirt as if she were drowning and he were her only life raft. His hands came up to cup her face, his calloused thumbs stroking her cheekbones with a reverence that made her want to weep. He stared down at her, his expression one of pure, agonized wonder. "You have no idea," he growled, his voice thick with a century of loneliness. And then he lowered his head and his mouth crashed down on hers. It wasn't a kiss. It was a collision. A desperate, soul-deep claiming that sent a shockwave through her entire body. It was all the tension, all the mystery, all the supernatural pull of the last few hours, unleashed in a flood of raw, untamed passion. He kissed her like he was starving, like he'd been waiting his entire life for this single moment. His taste was intoxicating, a heady mix of whiskey, pine, and pure male dominance. Tori moaned into his mouth, her body melting against his. She answered his ferocity with a desperate hunger of her own, her fingers tangling in his dark hair, pulling him closer. There was no thought, no reason, only this. Only him. In this faded hotel room, two strangers, two halves of the same soul, had finally, irrevocably found each other. And the world outside ceased to exist. Chapter 6. Unspoken Truths. The kiss was a cataclysm. It wiped away the sterile hotel room, the awkward conference, the bland reality of Tori's life, and replaced it with a universe of raw sensation. His mouth was firm, demanding, yet his hands were surprisingly gentle as they cradled her face, his thumbs stroking her skin as if she were made of precious glass. She responded with a fervor that shocked her, her body arching into his, a silent plea for more. He walked her backward until the back of her knees hit the edge of the bed, and she tumbled onto the crisp duvet, pulling him down with her. He followed, his powerful frame covering hers, a welcome protective weight. The scent of him, that intoxicating blend of storm and forest, was overwhelming, a drug she couldn't get enough of. His mouth left hers to trail a fiery path down her jaw, her throat, settling in the sensitive hollow of her collarbone. Every nerve in her body was alight, singing a song of pure, unadulterated need. Her hands roamed his back, feeling the hard planes of muscle bunch and release beneath his shirt. This was more than desire. This was a deep, primal recognition, a sense of rightness so profound it was terrifying. Her soul knew his. But just as the heat coiled into an unbearable knot in her core, he froze. A low, guttural growl so deep it vibrated through her entire body tore from his chest. He pushed himself up abruptly, his arms bracketing her head, his face a mask of savage conflict. His whiskey-gold eyes were darker now, molten, the pupils blown wide. He was breathing heavily, his chest rising and falling in ragged waves. "Ben?" she whispered, her voice husky, her body still thrumming with need. "Don't," he rasped, the word a warning. He was staring at her, but it felt as though he was looking at something dangerous, something that could destroy him. You have no idea what you are doing. What this is." He rolled off her, putting a few feet of distance between them, and stood, running a hand through his dark hair in a gesture of pure frustration. He paced the small space at the foot of the bed, the caged energy pouring off him. "I don't understand," Tori said, sitting up, pulling the rumpled duvet around her. "I felt it." "You felt it." "Felt it." He let out a harsh, humorless laugh. "What you felt is a spark. What I feel is an inferno that's threatening to burn down everything I've spent a century building." "A century?" The words snagged in her brain, but her thoughts were too clouded with passion to process it. "What are you talking about? Who are you?" He stopped pacing and turned to face her, his expression grim. "My name is Ben. And walking into this room, meeting you, it's the most dangerous and the most essential thing that has ever happened to me." He took a step closer, his eyes locking with hers. The raw want was still there, a burning undercurrent, but it was caged by an iron will. "I can't. We can't. Not like this. Not until you understand." "Understand what?" she pleaded, the sense of rejection a cold splash of water on the fire he'd started. He came to the edge of the bed and crouched so his eyes were level with hers. He reached out, his hand hovering over her cheek, not quite touching. "This connection between us," he said, his voice a low, intense whisper. "It is not a fling. It is not a one-night stand. It is permanent. It is a bond that, once fully sealed, can never be broken. And it comes with a world attached. A world that is dark and violent and has rules you can't possibly comprehend." He finally let his fingers brush against her skin, a touch so light it was barely there, yet it sent another jolt of lightning through her. "I want you, Tori," he growled, the confession raw and painful. "More than I have ever wanted anything. But I will not drag you into the dark until you are ready to choose it. And I am not a man who offers an easy choice." With that, he stood, turned, and walked out of her room, leaving her alone, aching and more confused than ever before. Chapter 7. A dangerous introduction. Tori slept in fits, her dreams filled with whiskey-gold eyes and the scent of a thunderstorm. She awoke the next morning to a room that felt both intimately familiar and strangely empty. The phantom scent of him lingered on the pillows, a torturous reminder of the night before. His cryptic words echoed in her head. "A bond that can never be broken. A world that is dark and violent." Was she insane? Had she hallucinated the whole thing? Her phone buzzed with an incoming call from Enid. "Morning, sunshine." Enid's voice was painfully cheerful. "Tell me you bolted your door and didn't interact with the handsome hallway creeper." Tori sank onto the edge of the bed, the lie already forming on her lips. "Yep. All locked up. Nothing to report." "Good. Now the opening keynote is in an hour. Mimosas in the lobby in 30? My treat. We need to strategize which after-party to crash tonight." "Yeah, 30 minutes, Tori agreed, her mind a million miles away. She was just about to step into the shower when a firm, deliberate knock sounded at her door. Not the soft, hesitant knock from last night. This was a knock of authority. Her heart leaped into her throat. It was him. She opened the door to find Ben standing there, looking even more imposing in the morning light. He was dressed in dark jeans and a simple gray Henley that strained across his broad chest. His expression was grim, determined. But he wasn't alone. Standing just behind him was a younger man with sharp features and wary, intelligent eyes. He was watching Tori with an unnerving mixture of curiosity and deep-seated concern, as if she were a fragile, unpredictable variable he was trying to solve. "We need to talk," Ben said, his voice leaving no room for argument. He stepped inside, the younger man following, and Ben shut the door firmly behind them. The small room instantly felt crowded, charged with a tense, masculine energy. "This is not a good time," Tori said, clutching her robe tighter. "I have a conference." "You won't be going," Ben stated simply. He gestured to the other man. "This is Liam. He works for me." Liam gave her a curt, respectful nod. "Ma'am." The formality was jarring. "Works for you? What are you, the CEO of stalking?" Tori shot back, her fear making her defensive. Ben's eyes flashed with something other than anger. It was a flicker of dark amusement. "Something like that. Liam, wait outside. Give us a minute." Liam nodded again and left without a word, closing the door softly behind him. The silent, unquestioning obedience was unsettling. Ben turned his full attention to her. "Last night after I left, I handled my business in the city. The problem I came here to solve. But it didn't end cleanly. There were witnesses. They know I was at this hotel. What does that have to with me?" Tori asked, though a cold dread was beginning to creep up her spine. He closed the distance between them, his size and intensity dominating the space. "Because of this," he said, his voice a low growl, "the connection between us. Others like me can sense it. It paints a target on your back. They will see you not as a person but as leverage. As my weakness." "Weakness? Ben, you sound insane." "I am being deadly serious," he insisted, his hands coming up to grip her shoulders, his touch firm but not painful. "I can't explain everything right now. But I need you to trust me. You are not safe here anymore. You are not safe anywhere without me." His words were terrifying, possessive, and utterly unbelievable. But as she looked into his desperate, sincere eyes, a deeper instinct took over. The same instinct that had recognized him in the hallway, the same instinct that had opened the door. It told her he was telling the truth. "Where are we going?" she whispered, the question a surrender. A look of profound relief washed over his face. "Somewhere safe. I promise. I will not let anyone harm you." His grip on her shoulders gentled, his thumbs stroking her skin, reigniting the fire from the night before. "Pack your things. We're leaving now." Chapter 8. The First Crack in the Facade. The Somewhere Safe was a stunning penthouse apartment overlooking the city, a space of minimalist luxury with floor-to-ceiling windows and cool, modern furniture. It was beautiful, sterile, and felt as much like a cage as it did a refuge. Liam had driven them in a black, unassuming sedan, the silence in the car thick with unspoken questions. He had dropped them off, given Ben a set of keys, and disappeared with a nod, leaving Tori utterly alone with her captivating, terrifying mystery of a man. For hours, a tense ceasefire existed between them. Ben gave her space, showing her the guest room, pointing out the fully stocked kitchen. He was a gracious host playing a role that didn't fit the raw, predatory energy simmering just beneath his skin. Tori explored the apartment, her footsteps echoing in the quiet. From the massive windows, she could see the Grand Atlas Hotel, a tiny model of the building where her entire reality had been upended less than 24 hours ago. Finally, she couldn't stand it anymore. She found him in the living area, staring out at the cityscape, his back to her, his shoulders broad and tense. "I can't do this, Ben," she said, her voice shaking slightly. "I can't just sit in this beautiful prison and pretend this is normal. You pull me from my life, you talk about danger and bonds and weaknesses, and you expect me to just, what? Sit here and wait." He turned slowly, his face a mask of weary patience. "I expect you to let me keep you safe." "Safe from what?" "From who?" she demanded, her voice rising. "You have to give me something, Ben. Anything. Because right now the only thing I feel threatened by is you." The words hit him like a physical blow. A flicker of deep hurt crossed his features before being replaced by a thunderous anger. "You think I am a threat to you?" he growled, stalking toward her. "I don't know what you are," she cried, standing her ground despite the primal urge to retreat. One minute you're kissing me like you can't live without me, the next you're a cold stranger giving orders. You're keeping secrets, and I deserve to know what I've been dragged into." He was in front of her now, caging her in against the cold glass of the window. The heat rolling off his body was immense, his scent flooding her senses. "You want to know what you're in?" he snarled, his voice a low, dangerous rumble. "You are in over your head. You have stumbled into a world you were not made for, and you have tied yourself to me so completely that I can feel your heartbeat in my own chest." His proximity was overwhelming, his anger a terrifying, seductive force. He wasn't yelling, but the contained violence in his voice was far more frightening. "I am trying," he bit out, his jaw clenched, "to keep the monster that lives inside of me from scaring you away. And you are making it very, very difficult." "Then let it out," she challenged, her own fear and frustration boiling over. "Show me. Show me the monster, Ben, because I am more afraid of the secrets than I am of the truth." Her words were a fatal miscalculation. A guttural, inhuman roar ripped from his throat, a sound that was not a product of human vocal cords. For a single terrifying second, his eyes bled from whiskey gold to a solid, luminous amber. They weren't human eyes. They were the eyes of a predator, of a wolf. He saw the sheer terror that washed over her face, and it was as if she had doused him in ice water. The golden light receded, the man slamming the beast back down into its cage. He recoiled from her as if he'd been burned, his face pale with shock and self-loathing. He had let it slip. He had shown her a glimpse of the truth, and he had terrified her. The fragile trust between them lay shattered on the floor. Chapter 9. Whispers of Another World. The silence in the aftermath of his outburst was a living entity, thick with her terror and his regret. Tori stared at him, her back pressed against the cold window, her mind struggling to process what she had seen. It was impossible. Eyes didn't just change color. They didn't glow. The sound he'd made had vibrated in her bones, a sound of pure, untamed wilderness. "What was that?" she whispered, her voice barely audible. Ben wouldn't look at her. He stood with his back to her, his hands braced against a marble countertop, his head bowed. "That," he said, his voice rough with shame, "was a mistake. That was what I am trying to protect you from." "Protect me from what?" "Your temper?" she asked, though she knew it was more than that. It was something fundamental. Something other. He finally turned, his face a landscape of torment. The anger was gone, replaced by a deep, weary vulnerability that was somehow more disarming than his rage. "Not my temper, Tori. My nature." He walked over to the sofa and sank into it, looking defeated. "Please," he said, gesturing to the chair opposite him. "Sit. I can't give you the whole truth. Not yet. It's too much. But you deserve more than shadows." Hesitantly she sat, perching on the edge of the cushion, her body still coiled with fear and a strange, unquenchable curiosity. "My family, we're not like other people," he began, choosing his words with immense care. "We are very old, very private. We live by a different code, a different set of laws. The world you see every day is only one layer of reality. There are others hiding in plain sight." He leaned forward, his elbows on his knees, his gaze intense. "We have primal instincts, stronger senses. We are fiercely territorial, fiercely loyal to our own, and fiercely possessive of what belongs to us." His eyes flickered with a possessive heat that made her skin tingle. "And you, Tori, from the moment I scented you outside that hotel room, you belong to me." The words should have sounded chauvinistic, insane. But coming from him they felt like a fundamental, unshakable truth. "The woman I called," he continued, "Elise. She is the matriarch of our family. Our seer. She sees the threads of fate that connect people. For 100 years she has told me my thread was singular, that I was destined to be alone. But when you checked into that specific hotel room, a room with a deep history for my family, you tied your thread to mine. Elise said she felt it the moment it happened. He called you my Anam Cara. My soulmate. It was a fairy tale, a myth, a piece of beautiful, poetic nonsense. But it explained everything. The sense of homecoming in the room. The impossible scent. The electric touch. The feeling that she had known him forever. So your eyes." She started, her voice trembling. "What I saw." He flinched, the shame returning. "It's part of the primal nature. When our emotions run too high, Rage, passion, fear for those we care about. The control slips. The human facade cracks. He looked at her, his expression pleading. I know this sounds crazy. I know I sound like I belong in a padded room. But look at me, Tori. Look at me and tell me you don't feel it too. This bond. This pull. Tell me it's not the most real thing you have ever felt in your life. She couldn't. She looked at this impossible, dangerous, tormented man, and despite the fear, despite the insanity of it all, she knew he was right. The connection was undeniable. She was inexplicably, irrevocably tied to him. She was falling in love with the monster and she hadn't even learned his true name. Chapter 10 The Mark. Her acceptance, her quiet belief in the face of his madness, was his undoing. The iron control Ben had maintained for days, for decades, finally crumbled to dust. He saw not fear in her eyes, but a dawning understanding, a courageous curiosity that called to every protective instinct in his soul. He rose from the sofa and crossed to her, kneeling before her chair. He took her hands in his, their touch no longer a shocking jolt but a deep, resonant hum. I have been alone for a very long time, Tori, he confessed, his voice thick with emotion. I convinced myself it was better that way. Safer. And then you walked out of that hotel room and I knew I had been living in black and white my entire life. You are all the color. The raw vulnerability in his voice was more seductive than any practiced line. It was the truth of his soul laid bare before her. She leaned forward, her hand coming up to cup his jaw, her fingers tracing the line of stubble. The monster was gone. This was Ben. Her Ben. She closed the final inches between them, her lips meeting his in a kiss that was the polar opposite of their first frantic collision. This was soft, questioning, and filled with a profound tenderness. It was an answer. I'm not running. I'm here. He lifted her from the chair as if she weighed nothing, his mouth never leaving hers, and carried her from the living room into the master bedroom. The setting sun cast long, golden rays through the windows, bathing the room in a warm, ethereal light. He laid her down on the vast, cool sheets and for a long moment, simply looked at her, his golden eyes filled with a century of pent-up adoration. What followed was not the frantic, desperate coupling of strangers, but the deep, soulful union of two halves finally made whole. Every touch was deliberate, every kiss an act of worship. He explored her body with a slow, reverent patience, learning her, memorizing her. And she, in turn, gave herself over to him completely, her fear washed away by a tidal wave of love and a sense of fated rightness. Passion built between them, a slow-burning fire that grew into a raging inferno. The primal nature he fought so hard to contain was no longer a threat. It was a part of this dance. His movements became more powerful, his touch more possessive. Low, pleased growls rumbled in his chest, vibrating through her, and instead of fear she felt a thrill of pure female satisfaction. She was his and he was hers. As the pleasure crested, building into an unbearable, soul-shattering peak, he buried his face in the curve of her neck. A wave of pure, possessive instinct, ancient and powerful, surged through him. His wolf, his very soul, screamed its need to claim her, to mark her as his for all eternity. His canines elongated slightly and he bit down. It wasn't a painful bite. It was a firm, possessive pressure, a brand of ownership and love. A jolt of pure energy, warm and golden like sunlight, shot from him into her, spreading through her veins, lighting up every cell in her body. It was the final mystical click of a lock finding its key. The bond was sealed. Later, as they lay tangled in the sheets, bathed in the soft glow of the city lights, Tori felt a faint tingling warmth on her shoulder. She slipped from the bed and padded to the large full-length mirror. There, just above her collarbone where he had marked her, was a faint silvery pattern on her skin. It looked like an intricate, luminous tattoo, a delicate tracery of lines that seemed to shimmer with a soft, inner light. It was beautiful, ethereal, and utterly impossible. She touched it, her fingers tracing the strange, new brand on her skin. She heard Ben's sharp intake of breath behind her as he rose and came to stand at her shoulder, his own eyes wide with awe and a hint of shock. "Ben," she whispered, her eyes meeting his in the reflection. "What did you do to me?" He looked at the mark, then at her face, and she saw that the final door had been opened. The time for half-truths and whispers was over. "I marked you," he said, his voice filled with reverence. "I sealed our bond. You're my mate, Tori. And I am a werewolf." Chapter 11. A different kind of skin. The word hung in the air between them, more shocking than any secret she could have imagined. Werewolf. Her rational 21st-century mind tried to reject it, to label him as delusional, a charismatic madman. But her body, her very soul, knew he was telling the absolute truth. The glowing eyes, the inhuman growl, the strange shimmering mark on her skin that was still tingling with a warm living energy. It all clicked into place, a terrifying and exhilarating key to an impossible lock. She didn't scream. She didn't run. She simply stared at their reflection in the mirror. A mortal woman and the magnificent mythical creature who had just claimed her. A wolf, she repeated, her voice a soft, wondering whisper. Like, you turn into an actual four-legged furry wolf? A faint, relieved smile touched Ben's lips. Of all the reactions he had braced himself for, calm, logical curiosity was the last one he expected. Yes, he said, his voice a low rumble. Though most of the time I try not to. It's messy. He gently turned her away from the mirror to face him. He took her hands, his grip warm and steadying. We call ourselves shifters. Lichens. The lore has bits and pieces right, but it's mostly garbage. We don't only turn on a full moon, though it does make our instincts stronger. His eyes darkened with the memory of his near uncontrollable passion in the hotel room. We live in structured societies we call dominions. We have laws, hierarchies. My role as an enforcer is to police those laws. It was too much to absorb, yet it felt as natural as breathing. The bond, the silver mark on her skin, was her translator. It bypassed her human skepticism and spoke directly to a deeper, more ancient part of her. She could feel the truth in him. More than that, she was starting to feel different. By hearing, she said, her eyes widening slightly. I can hear the soft hum of the refrigerator in the kitchen. I can hear the elevator moving down the shaft at the end of the hall. Ben's smile deepened. The mark. It connects you to me. To my world. Your senses will be heightened when you are with me. You will feel my emotions just as I feel yours. He brought her hand to his chest, placing it over his heart. I felt your terror when I lost control earlier. It was like a blade in my gut. That is why I tried to stay away. I never wanted to be the cause of that fear. The vulnerability in his confession was her undoing. All the remaining fear within her dissolved, replaced by a fierce, protective wave of emotion. This powerful, ancient creature was afraid of hurting her. She rose on her tiptoes and kissed him, a soft, reassuring press of her lips against his. I'm not afraid of you, Ben, she whispered against his mouth. I think I've been waiting for you my entire life without even knowing it. His arms wrapped around her, pulling her flush against his bare chest in a possessive, desperate embrace. A guttural groan of pure, unadulterated relief rumbled through him. He buried his face in her hair, inhaling her scent. You have no idea how long I have waited to hear that, he rasped. He was right. Her world had been turned upside down. She was mated to a werewolf, marked by a supernatural bond and hunted by nameless enemies. It was terrifying. But as she stood there, held securely in his arms, feeling the steady, powerful beat of his heart against her own, she had never felt safer in her entire life. Chapter 12. The Nature of the Hunt. The next morning, Tori awoke to the smell of coffee and a profound sense of peace. The world outside the penthouse windows was gray and drizzling, but inside, a warm, golden light seemed to emanate from Ben himself. He was already dressed, standing by the windows with 2 mugs in his hands, and he turned as if he had sensed the exact moment she opened her eyes. Good morning, he said, his voice a soft rumble. He handed her a mug, his fingers brushing hers, sending a familiar, pleasant jolt through her. I didn't even hear you get up, she said, taking a sip. The coffee was rich and perfect. You were sleeping deeply, he replied, his eyes crinkling at the corners. Your heartbeat was slow and steady. It's a very soothing sound. The casual intimacy of the statement, that he could hear her heartbeat from across the apartment, should have been unnerving. Instead, it felt deeply comforting. She was known to him on a level no one else could ever comprehend. As they drank their coffee in a comfortable silence, Tori knew the peace couldn't last. Ben, she began, her tone serious. You said I was in danger. You said the problem you came here to solve didn't end cleanly. You need to tell me everything. He sighed, the relaxed posture leaving him. The enforcer was back. His name is Kane, Ben said, his voice hardening. He was once part of my dominion. He challenged the old Alpha, my predecessor, and lost. Instead of accepting his defeat, he broke from the pack and chose the life of a rogue. He despises our laws, our secrecy. He believes we should not hide from humans but rule them. He sounds like a psychopath, Tori said, a chill running down her spine. He is. He's an anarchist who preys on the weak, gathering other exiles and rogues to his cause. He was operating in this city, getting sloppy, leaving evidence that could expose our entire world. My job was to find him and his followers and remove them from the board. And did you? Ben's jaw tightened. Most of them. But Kane himself got away. And one of his lieutenants saw me at the hotel. He would have scented you on me. Kane now knows that the Blackwood enforcer, a man who has walked alone for a century, has found his mate. The implication was terrifyingly clear. He'll come for me, she whispered. He will use you as a weapon against me, Ben corrected her, his voice a low, vicious growl. He will try to break me by threatening you. Which is why we cannot stay here. This city is his hunting ground now, and you are the prey. The protective Alpha was in full force now. His plan was to spirit her away to the Dominion's main territory, a remote, fortified location deep in the mountains where she would be safe, guarded, and completely isolated from her old life. He spoke of it as an inevitability, a solution. But as Tori listened, a new, unfamiliar resolve hardened within her. The woman who had checked into room 713 3 days ago would have agreed meekly. She would have been a terrified victim, grateful to be hidden away. But that woman was gone. The mark on her shoulder, the bond in her soul, had changed her. No, she said, her voice quiet but firm. Ben stopped, looking at her in surprise. No. You're not going to lock me away in some mountain fortress while you go off to fight him, Ben, she stated, standing to face him. You said it yourself. He sees me as your weakness. But he's wrong. And we are going to prove it to him. I am not your liability. I am your partner. So we are going to figure this out together. Chapter 13. Collision of Worlds. Tori's declaration hung in the air, a challenge Ben wasn't prepared for. He saw the fire in her eyes, the stubborn set of her jaw, and it sent a wave of fierce pride and abject terror through him. He loved her strength, but it was that very strength that would put her in harm's way. Tori, you don't understand the kind of violence Kane is capable of, he argued, his voice tight. This isn't a negotiation. This is survival. And hiding me away feels like a surrender, she shot back. He wins if he succeeds in separating us, in making you treat me like a fragile doll to be locked in a box. Their argument was interrupted by the insistent, frantic buzzing of Tori's phone on the nightstand. She glanced at the screen. 15 missed calls and a string of panicked texts from Enid. Her heart sank. In the whirlwind of the last 2 days, she had completely forgotten about the real world. About her best friend. Oh God, Enid, she murmured, her fight with Ben forgotten. She picked up the phone. Before she could dial, a loud, insistent banging echoed from the apartment's main door. It wasn't a polite knock. It was the sound of a fist hitting solid wood. Ben's entire posture changed. He moved with silent, lethal grace, placing himself between Tori and the bedroom door, a low growl rumbling in his chest. Stay here, he commanded in a whisper. They heard a muffled voice from the hallway. Tori, I know you're in there. I called the hotel, they said you checked out with some guy. Are you okay? If you don't open this door, I am calling the police. It was Enid. Ben, no, it's okay, Tori said, rushing forward and grabbing his arm. The muscle was like granite. It's my friend. She's just worried. Ben's golden eyes were blazing, his predator instincts screaming that this was a threat, an intruder. She cannot be here, he snarled. I can't just ignore her, she'll call the cops and that's the last thing you need, right? Tori reasoned, her mind racing. Let me handle it. Please. Just try not to look like a possessive, supernatural warlord for 5 minutes. He shot her a look that was anything but reassuring, but he gave a stiff, reluctant nod. He retreated to the far side of the living room, his arms crossed, his presence a thundercloud of disapproval. Tori took a deep breath and opened the door. Enid practically fell inside, her face a mess of fear and righteous anger. Tori, what the hell is going on? Who is this guy? I've been picturing you chopped up in a suitcase for the last 12 hours. Then she saw Ben. She took in his imposing size, the raw intensity in his stare, and the sheer, palpable possessiveness with which he was watching Tori. Enid's expression went from worried to openly hostile. She stepped in front of Tori, creating a physical barrier. "Who are you?" she demanded of Ben. "He's a friend, Enid," Tori said quickly. "It's a long story, but I'm fine. I'm safe." "Safe?" Enid scoffed, her eyes still locked on Ben. "You disappear from a hotel with a complete stranger, you don't answer your phone, and I find you locked in a penthouse with a guy who looks like he's about to tear my throat out. That's not my definition of safe. You should leave." Ben's voice was a low, dangerous rumble. "Not without my friend," Enid shot back, her bravery admirable but foolish. Tori stepped between them, placing a hand on Enid's arm and looking imploringly at Ben. "Enid, please," Tori said, her voice firm. "I appreciate you worrying. I really do. But I am okay. I am where I want to be. I need you to trust me and go." The hurt and betrayal on Enid's face was a physical blow. "Tori, what has he done to you?" she whispered. "He's shown me who I am," Tori replied, the words feeling truer than anything she had ever said. It was the final straw. Enid looked from Tori's strange, resolute face to Ben's menacing glare and took a step back, her fear finally outweighing her anger. "Fine," she said, her voice trembling. "But this isn't over. I'll be checking on you. And if I get even a hint that you're in trouble, I'm calling everyone." She turned and fled, the apartment door slamming shut behind her, leaving a silence thick with the wreckage of a lifelong friendship. Tori felt the loss keenly, the first steep price of her new life. Chapter 14. A Taste of Violence. The confrontation with Enid left a bitter taste in Tori's mouth and a heavy tension in the apartment. Ben's protective instincts, now fully awakened, were on a hair trigger. He saw Enid's intrusion as proof that the human world would continue to be a danger, a complication. Tori saw it as a painful severing of her past. "This is why you must be isolated," Ben stated, his voice flat. "Your worlds cannot coexist. It puts you at risk." "So I'm supposed to have no friends, no family? Just you?" Tori shot back, the hurt from her friend's departure making her sharp. "Yes," he growled, his honesty brutal. "Until Kane is dealt with, yes. That is exactly what I am saying." The argument was cut short by Ben's phone ringing. He answered, his side of the conversation clipped and formal. "Yes. He's moving. We're understood." He hung up, his face grim. "That was one of my contacts in the city. Kane's pack is on the move. They're clearing out of their known safe house. He's preparing for something." He turned to Tori, his decision made. "We're leaving. No. We'll take the service elevator to the garage. My car is secure there." "And go where?" "To the Dominion. Where you will be safe," he said, his tone leaving no room for debate. This time Tori didn't argue. The news of Kane moving, of the threat becoming active, chilled the anger out of her. The drive down in the silent elevator was suffocating. When the doors opened into the dim concrete parking garage, the air felt cold and dangerous. Ben's hand was firmly on the small of her back, his head on a constant swivel, his senses on high alert. They were halfway to his black sedan when two figures stepped out from behind a concrete pillar, blocking their path. They were large men dressed in street clothes, but they moved with a predatory grace that was utterly inhuman. Their eyes held a feral, malicious light. "Ben," one of them sneered, a cruel smile spreading across his face. "Kane was beginning to think you'd run and hid. And look what you brought with you. Is this her? The little human pet?" Ben shoved Tori behind him, his body becoming a solid shield. A low, warning growl, the one she'd heard in the penthouse, rumbled in his chest. "You have one chance to walk away," Ben said, his voice deadly calm. The two rogues laughed. "We have orders to bring her to him. He wants to see what all the fuss is about." They charged. What happened next was a blur of brutal, lightning-fast violence. Ben moved faster than Tori's human eyes could track. He met the first rogue's attack, his arms snapping out to block a punch. The sound of bone cracking echoed in the garage. He slammed the man into the concrete wall with enough force to leave a spiderweb of cracks in the plaster. The second rogue tried to get around him to grab Tori. Ben spun, catching him by the throat. He lifted the man, who was easily over 200 pounds, clear off the ground with one hand. Tori saw it then for just a second. His eyes were blazing gold, his canines slightly elongated. The monster was unleashed. He didn't kill them. It was a calculated, brutal act of enforcement. He left them broken and whimpering on the greasy floor of the garage. He was breathing heavily, the adrenaline of the fight making his control shimmer. He turned to Tori, his eyes still holding a feral gleam. She should have been terrified. She had just witnessed a level of violence that belonged in a horror movie. But she wasn't. Seeing him fight, seeing the raw, untamed power he wielded to protect her, ignited a fierce, primal heat within her. It was terrifying, yes, but it was also the most exhilarating thing she had ever seen. He stalked back to her, his chest heaving, his gaze intense. He backed her up against the cold metal of the car, his hands caging her in, his body pressing hers against the door. "Now do you see?" he rasped, his voice thick with the aftermath of battle. "Now do you understand why you cannot be a part of this?" But all she could see was him. Her protector. Her monster. Her mate. "I see a man who would do anything to keep me safe," she whispered, her hands coming up to cup his face, her thumbs stroking his jaw. The adrenaline and the terror and the passion crashed together. He crushed his mouth to hers in a savage, possessive kiss. It was raw, desperate, and fueled by the very real fear of having almost lost her. She met him with equal fire, her body arching against his, a silent answer to his unasked question. She wasn't going anywhere. Chapter 15, The Seer's Gambit. They didn't go to the Dominion. After the attack in the garage, Ben knew Kane would be expecting him to run to the safest, most obvious place. Instead, he took them to a different safe house, a nondescript industrial loft in a converted warehouse district, a place that was off the books, known only to him and one other person. The adrenaline of the fight bled into a desperate, passionate reaffirmation of their bond. It was rougher this time, less tender and more primal. It was a frantic claiming, a physical expression of his terror of losing her and her exhilarating acceptance of his violent world. Afterward, they lay in the dark, the sounds of the city a distant hum. The reality of their situation had finally, truly sunk in. They were being hunted. "We can't keep running," Tori said into the darkness, her voice steady. "He'll always be a step behind us. You know where his old safe house is. We know he's moving. We have to get ahead of him." "It's not that simple," Ben growled, his arm tightening around her. "He's not just a brute. He's cunning. Walking into his territory without a clear plan is suicide." "Then we need a better plan," she insisted. "We need more information." Ben was silent for a long moment. "There is one person who might see a path we can't," he said finally. "But I hesitate to involve her more than I already have." "Elise," Tori guessed. He nodded against her hair. He rose from the bed and retrieved his phone. A few moments later, the calm, ancient voice of the seer filled the quiet loft, the speakerphone projecting a sense of serene power. "Benjamin. I feel the Luna's presence. I trust you are both unharmed," Elise began, her tone knowing. "We were attacked," Ben said bluntly. "Two of Kane's. At the hotel garage. They're alive, but they know she's with me. He's no longer just testing the waters, Elise. He's hunting." "I have seen it," Elise replied, her voice grave. "The threats are stained with violence. But you are seeing the pattern incorrectly, Benjamin. Your fear for your mate is clouding your judgment as an enforcer." "What do you mean?" he demanded. "You believe Kane wants to capture her, to use her as a bargaining chip to get to you. It is a logical assumption," the seer explained. "It is also wrong." A cold silence fell over the room. Tori felt a chill that had nothing to do with the temperature. "Kane is not just a rebel, he is a fanatic," Elise's voice was grim. "He believes our kind has been weakened by hiding, by our proximity to humanity. To him, a fated bond with a human is not just a weakness. It is a corruption. An abomination that pollutes the very essence of our bloodline." The seer paused, letting the weight of her next words sink in. "He will not try to capture your mate, Benjamin. He will not bargain. He will try to cleanse her from our world. His goal is not to break you. It is to purify you in his twisted view by killing her." The air left Tori's lungs. This was no longer about leverage. It was an assassination. "And he will not do it quietly," Elise continued, her voice hardening. "He is gathering the dispossessed, the angriest of the rogues. He means to make a statement. He will make her death a spectacle, a warning to any who would weaken the bloodline as you have. Where is he, Elise? Ben snarled, his voice a low, murderous thing. He is moving toward a place of power, a place he believes is a symbol of our decay, the Grand Atlas Hotel, the seer revealed. He plans to take it to make his stand in the very place the first bond was forged, the room where your own destiny was awakened. He will turn your sanctuary into a tomb. The final piece of the puzzle slammed into place. Cain wasn't running. He was going on the offensive, preparing for a siege. It is a reckless, arrogant gambit, Elise said. And it is our only opportunity. He will be expecting you to run or to fortify the Dominion. He will not expect a direct assault. You are the enforcer. It is time to be the hunter. The line went dead. Ben stood in the darkness, a statue carved from pure, murderous rage. Tori rose and went to him, placing her hand on his arm. He was trembling. She's right, Tori said, her voice devoid of fear, replaced by a cold, hard resolve. We can't wait for him to come to us. We have to go to him. We have to end this. Chapter 16. The Enforcer's Army. The seer's words transformed the atmosphere in the loft from one of desperate evasion to one of cold, lethal focus. The hunted had become the hunters. Ben was no longer just a mate protecting his female. He was the Blackwood Enforcer, a weapon of the Dominion, and his singular purpose was now to eradicate the cancer that was Cain. I need to make some calls, he said, his voice flat and devoid of emotion. It was a terrifying calm that promised utter destruction. This isn't something I can do alone. For the next hour, Tori watched him work. He moved with a quiet, deadly efficiency, his phone conversations a series of clipped, coded commands. He was summoning his team, his pack, the warriors who answered his call without question. He was mobilizing an army. The first to arrive was Liam, the sharp-eyed young shifter from the penthouse. He entered the loft with a silent nod, his gaze falling on Tori for a moment. She saw a flicker of profound respect in his eyes, an acknowledgement that she was the reason this was all happening, the Luna who had brought their solitary enforcer back into the fold. Soon others followed. They materialized from the city's shadows, arriving in twos and threes. They were a formidable group, both men and women, each radiating the same controlled, predatory energy as Ben. They were the Dominion's elite, shifters who, like Ben, walked the line between the human world and their own, the silent guardians and warriors. They filled the industrial space, their combined presence a palpable force. Tori, the lone human in a room full of werewolves, should have been terrified. Instead, she felt a strange sense of belonging. The mark on her shoulder was a warm, steady hum, a passport into this impossible world. Ben stood before them, a true alpha in his element. He laid out the situation with brutal clarity. Cain's ideology, his plan to take the hotel, his ultimate goal to kill Tori as a statement. A collective low growl rumbled through the assembled shifters. An attack on a destined mate, especially the mate of an enforcer, was an unforgivable sin, a declaration of war on the very fabric of their society. Cain believes our traditions make us predictable, Ben said, his golden eyes sweeping over his warriors. He believes our laws make us weak. He's expecting me to run and hide my mate. He is expecting a defense. We will give him an offense. We will hit him where he is strongest, in the place he has chosen for his profane theater. We will take back the Grand Atlas. He then turned his gaze to Tori, and the entire room followed suit. The hard enforcer softened for a fraction of a second. The Luna will be our eyes, he announced, his voice ringing with pride. Cain doesn't know the full extent of the bond. He feels what I feel. Through me she will feel the battlefield. He looked back at his team. Liam, you and your unit are on extraction. The hotel is still full of human guests and staff. Your priority is to create a silent, mandatory evacuation. Gas leak, bomb threat, I don't care what you use. Get the civilians out without tipping off Cain's scouts. The rest of you, we go in hard and we go in fast. We will hunt him floor by floor. We end this tonight. It was a daring, almost suicidal plan, to attack a fortified enemy on their chosen ground. But looking at the fierce loyalty in the eyes of the warriors, Tori knew they wouldn't hesitate. They trusted their leader. As the team began their final preparations, checking weapons and murmuring strategies, Ben came to her. He took her hands, his touch grounding her. I can leave you here, he said, his voice a low, private rumble meant only for her. You would be safe. Tori looked from his worried face to the room full of warriors preparing to risk their lives for her, for their bond. She thought of Enid, of the life she had lost and the new one she was fighting for. "No," she said, her voice unshakable. "You said my world and your world couldn't coexist. You were wrong. This is my world now. I'm with you to the end of the line." He stared at her, a universe of love and awe in his eyes. He leaned down and pressed a hard, desperate kiss to her lips, a final promise before the storm. "To the end of the line," he echoed. Chapter 17. The Siege of the Grand Atlas. The Grand Atlas Hotel, once a symbol of corporate luxury, had become a war zone. Under the cover of a flawlessly executed fire alarm, Liam and his team had managed to clear most of the civilians, their movements swift and silent. But Kane's scouts had realized something was wrong. The battle had begun prematurely in the grand, marble-floored lobby. Tori was stationed with 2 guards in a secure command van a block away, surrounded by monitors displaying the hotel's security camera feeds. But her most vital connection to the battle was the bond. It was a live wire humming with Ben's controlled adrenaline, his focus, his rage. Through him she could feel the ebb and flow of the fight, the position of his warriors, the presence of the enemy. "Lobby is clear," Ben's voice crackled through her earpiece. Calm amidst the chaos she could feel raging through their link. "We're moving to the 7th floor. That's his command center. The room. Room 713. Kane, in his arrogance, had made their fated room his throne. "Ben, wait," Tori said, her eyes fixed on one of the monitors. "There's a heat signature in the west stairwell, moving up fast. Too small to be a shifter. It's a human. They missed one." "Damn it," he snarled. "We don't have time." "I can see her," Tori said, zooming in on the feed. It was a young woman in a hotel staff uniform, frozen in terror on the 5th floor landing. "She's trapped between Kane's forces and yours." Through the bond she felt Ben's conflict. Leaving a human to fend for themselves went against every law he upheld. But stopping would mean losing momentum, giving Kane time to fortify his position. "I'll go," a calm female voice said over the comms. It was Alara, one of Ben's most trusted warriors. "I can get to her without being seen. You keep moving, Ben. We'll meet you at the top." Tori felt a wave of gratitude and pride for these shifters, these strangers who fought with such honor. She relayed the girl's position to Alara, her human perspective becoming an invaluable asset. She wasn't just a weakness to be protected, she was a part of the pack, a vital piece of the operation. The main force, led by Ben, reached the 7th floor. The hallway that had been the site of their fated meeting was now a battlefield. Tori watched through the grainy camera feed, her heart in her throat as Ben and his warriors engaged Kane's rogues. It was a brutal, efficient slaughter. Ben moved like a phantom of death, a whirlwind of contained violence. Then the door to room 713 burst open. Kane emerged not in wolf form but as a man. He was large and charismatic, with silver-streaked hair and eyes that burned with a fanatic's light. He held a silver dagger in his hand, a weapon specifically forged to harm their kind. "Ben," he bellowed, his voice echoing down the hall. "I knew you wouldn't be able to stay away. You've brought your filth into our most sacred place." Ben stepped forward, his warriors holding back, knowing this was a fight for their alpha alone. "This room is a testament to the bond you despise, Kane. And tonight it will be your tomb." The 2 alphas circled each other, a vortex of hatred and power. Kane was fast, his silver dagger a blur, but Ben was stronger, fueled by a righteous fury. Tori felt every blow through the bond, every surge of pain and rage. It was an agony, but she didn't turn away. She was his anchor. Kane, realizing he was outmatched in a direct fight, did the one thing Ben hadn't anticipated. He wasn't aiming for Ben. With a final, desperate lunge, he threw the silver dagger not at his opponent but down the hallway, directly toward the stairwell door where he knew Alara would be emerging with the human girl. It was an act of pure nihilistic spite. Chapter 18. Aluna's Gambit. Ben's roar of fury was a physical force, but he was too far away to intercept the blade. Through the bond, Tori felt a white-hot spike of panic and protective rage surge through him. The life of his pack member and an innocent human were at stake. In the command van, time seemed to slow down. Tori saw the silver glint of the dagger spinning through the air on the monitor. She saw the stairwell door beginning to open. She knew with chilling certainty that Alara and the girl were about to walk into its path. There was no time to shout a warning. There was no time for anyone to act. Except for her. The sprinklers, she breathed, her eyes darting to a schematic of the hotel systems on another screen. The 7th-floor water main. "Luna, what are you doing?" one of her guards asked, alarmed as she began typing furiously on a spare keyboard linked to the hotel's maintenance controls. "Creating a distraction," she said, her fingers flying. She found the override command for the fire suppression system. It was a desperate, insane gamble. She hit enter. In the hallway, a split second before the dagger reached the door, the sprinkler heads in the ceiling exploded. A torrential, high-pressure downpour of water erupted, flooding the corridor. The force of the unexpected deluge struck the spinning dagger mid-flight, altering its trajectory just enough. It clattered harmlessly against the wall, inches from the door as Alara pulled the terrified staff member out. The sudden flood threw the entire hallway into chaos. Kane stared, his face a mask of disbelief. That single, impossible moment of confusion was all Ben needed. He moved, a black blur of retribution. He slammed Kane back into room 713, the doorframe splintering from the impact. The camera inside was still active. Tori watched as Ben disarmed the traitor with brutal efficiency. He didn't kill him quickly. He forced Kane to his knees in the center of the room, the very spot where their fated connection had been born. "You wanted to make a statement," Ben growled, his voice a low, terrifying promise of pain. "You wanted to teach our people about the corruption of love. You will be my statement. They will learn what happens to those who threaten the mate of an enforcer." The feed cut out. But Tori didn't need to see. She could feel it through the bond. A final, decisive act of justice. A wave of cold, clean finality. And then, peace. The static of Kane's hatred was gone from their connection, leaving only the warm, steady hum of Ben's presence. It was over. A few minutes later, Ben's voice, ragged and exhausted, came over the comms. "Status report." One by one his warriors checked in. There were injuries but no casualties. The last voice was Alara's. "The civilian is safe, Alpha. And, thank you, Luna. You saved our lives." Tori closed her eyes, a wave of profound relief washing over her. She hadn't just been an observer. She had been a participant. She had turned the tide. Ben's voice came again, this time for her alone, a private channel filled with awe and a love so powerful it made her ache. "I'm coming to get you," he said. "My brave, brilliant mate." Chapter 19. The Room of New Beginnings. Ben found her standing just outside the command van, the flashing lights of distant emergency vehicles painting the street in strokes of red and blue. The moment he stepped out of the shadows, she ran to him. He met her halfway, sweeping her into an embrace that was both crushing and infinitely gentle. He smelled of rain from the sprinklers, of battle and of home. He held her face in his hands, his thumbs stroking her cheeks as he scanned her for any sign of harm, his golden eyes filled with a universe of emotion. "Are you all right?" he rasped. "I am now," she whispered, her hands coming to rest on his chest, feeling the steady, strong beat of his heart. The bond between them was a calm, radiant river, the chaotic eddies of the fight smoothed away, leaving only a deep, powerful current. He led her back toward the hotel, past his warriors who were securing the scene with silent efficiency. They all nodded to Tori as she passed, their expressions a mixture of respect and reverence. She was no longer just the enforcer's mate. She was the Luna who had saved one of their own, the strategist who had turned the tide. She had earned her place not just through a fated bond, but through her own courage and intellect. They rode the elevator up in silence, their hands clasped together. When the doors opened onto the 7th floor, the hallway was a wreck of drenched carpet and debris, but the violent energy was gone. Ben led her to the door of room 713. It hung crookedly on its hinges, the wood splintered. Inside, the room had been cleared. It was just a room again. Water dripped from the sprinkler heads, the bed was overturned, and the generic seaside painting was askew. But the feeling, the one she had felt the first moment she stepped inside, was still there. That profound sense of homecoming. It wasn't the room itself, she realized. It was the place. The nexus point where their two souls had finally collided. "This is where it all began," she said softly, walking to the center of the room. "This is where my life began," he corrected her, his voice thick with emotion. He came to stand behind her, wrapping his arms around her waist and pulling her back against his chest, just as she had imagined he might on that first day. "I was a ghost for 100 years, Tori," he murmured into her hair. "A creature of duty and discipline, living in a world without color. You walked into this room and you brought the sun with you. You saved me long before you saved Alara in that hallway." She turned in his arms, her hands coming up to frame his face. The love she felt for this man, this wolf, this ancient, powerful, tender soul, was so immense it filled every part of her. "And you saved me, Ben. From a life of quiet desperation I didn't even realize I was living." He looked at the shimmering silver mark on her shoulder, which seemed to glow with a soft, happy light in the dim room. "Elise calls it the Anam Cara, the soulmate. But it's more than that. You are the anchor to my humanity and the wildness that lets my soul run free. You are everything." Chapter 20. The Enforcer's Home. They didn't stay in the city. A few days later, after the last threads of Cain's rebellion had been unraveled by Ben's loyal pack, he took her home. The Blackwood Dominion wasn't a single place, but a vast, sprawling territory of protected ancient forests and hidden valleys in the mountains. Their destination was Ben's private home, a place he had not shared with anyone in his long life. It was a house built of dark wood and river stone, nestled on the shore of a crystal-clear alpine lake. It was elegant, masculine, and had been built to withstand a siege, but inside, it was filled with books and art and comfortable furniture. It was a home, not a fortress. It was a place that had been waiting for a missing piece. In the weeks that followed, Tori's new reality settled into a peaceful, happy rhythm. She learned the ways of his world not as an outsider but as an integral part of it. She met Elise, the ancient, wise seer, who greeted her not as a stranger, but as a long-lost granddaughter. She was formally introduced to the pack, who accepted her not out of duty to their enforcer, but with genuine respect for the Luna who had fought beside them. Her friendship with Enid began to heal slowly. After a long, tearful phone call where Tori, without revealing the supernatural truth, explained the protective, all-consuming nature of her new life, Enid began to understand. She didn't have all the pieces, but she could hear the genuine happiness in Tori's voice, and that was enough. One crisp autumn evening, Tori and Ben stood on the deck of his house, watching the sun set behind the snow-capped mountains, painting the lake in hues of orange and purple. A comfortable silence settled between them, their bond a warm, steady presence. "Do you ever miss it?" he asked quietly, his gaze on her face. "Your old life? The simplicity?" Tori thought of the bland conferences, the lonely apartment, the feeling of always searching for something she couldn't name. She looked at the magnificent wild landscape before her, felt the solid warmth of the man beside her, and touched the faint silvery mark on her shoulder. "I wasn't living, Ben," she said, her voice filled with a certainty that resonated in her very soul. "I was just waiting. My life didn't start until I checked into room 713. He smiled, a genuine soul-deep expression of pure happiness that transformed his handsome face. He pulled her close, his lips finding hers in a kiss that held all the promise of their shared future. It wasn't just a story about a meeting in a forgotten hotel room. It was the story of a bond so powerful it had defied worlds, defeated fanatics, and built a new destiny. Here in the heart of the wild, with her wolf, her enforcer, her mate, Tori was finally, completely, irrevocably home. Think.